the next presentation, as I said, is to cover the topic of microlearning, specifying that perhaps it's always much better to take small steps and use all time gaps, being in a tram or on a bike, or difficult to say. And for this presentation, I would like to hand the floor over to Ms. Světla Vitingerová, who will tell us more. Can we hear each other? Perhaps I don't have the good sound, sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, and you may start your presentation. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I devoted my presentation to the micro-learning and its application in online courses, something that have been sort of introduced in the previous presentation. I am glad to that. Online courses are published by the Unicorn Publishing House. It's the publishing house for e-books and e-education learning materials. We have editions for various target groups, being persons from the primary and secondary schools, universities, companies, organizations, and general public. Currently, we have published approximately 65 e-books and nearly 180 e-courses. Let's get back to the topic of the conference, namely the education in future. Majority of experts agree that we should keep up with the fast technological development and various challenges of the present era, namely the lifelong learning. The key point is how, within the limited time, we could learn in an efficient way. And on the basis of the recent knowledge, we have come to the micro-learning. Sometimes people call it nano-learning. And it means that I can learn in the time when I'm free, taking my own pace, and bite-size learning, and I will explain this English notion in a while. Imagine that you would like to take something, having a small bite, and such small bites would be an ideal solution. Cook would prepare them with love, they look beautiful, and they're nicely served. And if you eat them, if the taste was amiable, you may have another one, or if you have time enough, so you may opt for another quick bite. And it is the same approach applied in micro-learning. So in other words, it means that we structure the schoolwork, we divide it into several smaller parts. Information is provided in concise, brief, systematic way, comprehensive way, in order to get the information to the student in the right moment of the learning process. If we are to discuss the size of this small bite, so to say, of the micro-learning, we have to take into account the time that the students will devote to the learning, and the longer time, the smaller attention of the student. Take a guess how many minutes a person may devote to my presentation at the level of concentration. Let me try the answer. It's approximately 10 minutes only. And of course, we see that the attention span is declining. So this should be the upper threshold of the limit of the attention span concentration. Another key element is the individualization of the schoolwork, so to say, that we apply our own pace, we may repeat when we want, we may exercise what we need. And another condition is the accessibility, to be able to use short periods of time when available, anytime, anywhere, be it just before I go to bed or when I'm in the waiting room somewhere, etc., anytime, anywhere. And the micro-learning approach plus simple course kit resulted in the concept of online Unicode publishing courses. It means these courses are available for 24 hours a day, and thanks to this simple environment, so whenever you may get connected to the internet, so these courses are available. The previous speakers showed our online courses. They demonstrated how we can use them and work with them. So let's have a look at them. So these are the teaching blocks. This is, for instance, one particular teaching block. So these are the white squares, and each and every topic is then divided into individual lessons, and lessons are the smallest functional wholes. One lesson should take max 5, maximum 10 minutes. The reason is that the student is as much attentive as possible. We added another key element into the courses that supports the attention of the student, and this is what we call learning through a question. As our colleague said, a question is a strong activizing element that forces us to think carefully, to try to find answers on the basis of our already acquired knowledge, and various modes of answers may keep the attention of the student. Obviously, at present we offer 11 modes of answers within our course, so this is one of the possibilities, but you may also complete the boxes. You may just put the answer into a sequence, you may assign a particular answer, you may decide on a veracity of the given answer, and you may check the results. The course offers 11 answers, but me personally, I would love to come up with the number 12 answer. After putting the answers, so the student gets to the feedback to the answer, and obviously it is quite natural that you may commit a mistake. That's normal, and you have to work with the mistake done. And the feedback should help you and explain why my answer was right or wrong. At the same time, it may be taken as an individualization tool because it may add some more knowledge, links, and it may link you to other potentially right answers with the aim to create a potential set of answers. Because our lesson does not consist of answers of the game type, but it's a well-processed system of follow-up questions. The questions are raised in a systemic, comprehensible way based on fundamental knowledge of the student, adding more and more further information. And of key importance is that we avoid too big jumps because it can slow down the attention of the student.
Every lesson has a certain objective, and the students can repeat them as many times as they like. They can pose as many questions. They can use as many milestones or auto tests to measure their progress, and they can also see it in the history of their activities, which could be a motivational step for many students. Our educational online courses based on microlearning can be used in the corporate sector as well. They are also part of the accredited program at Unicorn University. They are used within the Red Monster edition. They are used in shadow education and self-study. It's like a digital notebook, which is what some teachers describe it as. And of course, the self-study has to do with language courses, for example, and I would like to give the floor now to Bara, my colleague, which will tell us something about her experience from teaching German. I would like to follow up to what Světla Vitingerová spoke about. I would like to talk about following up to the Red Monster concept. In my case, it is online learning with Monster. I have been teaching online for many years, and I'm the educational guarantor of language courses within Red Monster. I'm also an author of a German podcast. I also see what the background of the administration of our courses is, so I can actually launch it in terms of a pilot with our students and then see the progress within our application. Now, why do I use the Red Monster courses? Not only because I contribute to them with our authors, but they save a lot of time for me because I create my classes on a tailor-made basis. I have Eva, for example, a student. She's very enthusiastic about playing the guitar. She tells me a lot about how she's progressing with her guitar, about concerts. So if I tailor-make a class for her, it takes up a lot of my time. But the theoretical concept of, for example, using verbs of the past tense, those are concepts that do not change between students. Thanks to the Red Monster concept, I can save a lot of time. I can serve the theory as hors d'oeuvres, as little canopies, and then use all the other time for my tailor-made concept. And of course, also the accessibility of the background material for students. That means the students can use this at any time they like, usually for young people that have a family, work, they're juggling careers. So if they can open the course for 5 minutes on the tram, that's better than nothing. So how do I use Red Monster in my teaching process? We have synchronous teaching, and that means individual or group classes when we are all at the same time online. So we have a screen, we go through the course, they respond, I pose questions, I ask them to explain the answers and to determine whether they're right or wrong, which of course gives an added value to the courses in terms of them speaking actively, which otherwise isn't possible, of course, but they provide us with a structure of having something to talk about. In this case, on the slide, you see which countries neighbor Germany. We can talk about it for another 5 to 10 minutes. This activity doesn't even take 1 minute, which is something that benefits any teacher, but within the class, it can take 10 to 20 minutes, which is a huge in terms of times saving, and it is useful for me and the student. But what is really interesting is the asynchronous teaching, or in this case called blended learning, when the teacher pays for conversation, but they don't want to waste time for grammatical analysis, for example. So I sent them the class. We are testing this in a pilot, so they have this from me. In the future, they will purchase it from the Red Monster website, and they are assigned a certain number of topics or themes to study. They take notes. If something's not clear, they go through it. During our class, they provide for the theoretical framework themselves, and then they can test it in conversation classes with me. A huge advantage is that our courses focus on the most common mistakes that our speakers use, which makes us different from Duolingo or Babel, which are also good but not so applicable to our environment. And here we determine progress with the help of stars when the students see exactly how they're doing, which is usually one conversation per week and one lesson in Red Monster. Some shorter activities as well for which I use Red Monster. Usually a good a good game in terms of the introduction to the class in order for the student to start using the language actively, and this is something that I also use to repeat new material at the end of a class or at the beginning of the class, and that is a group quiz. It is very surprising how enthusiastic people can get about it. I take notes in terms of who replied first. It's in the style of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. This has proved to be very, very successful. And then another good tip that I have is a comparison in terms of those learning a language but are not comparable. I will start courses B1, and I need the course not to be too fast or too slow for someone, which is very problematic. For example, I can tell the students to read something on the internet, click on some things, but I have no control over it before they start the course. But I can check, because I'm an educational guarantor, the administration of the students, so I can actually verify that they are working with the course, that they have these little stars there appearing, and then on the basis of that I can accept them, to the new course, and I can be sure that it corresponds to their level. And of course, that also provides me with good material for grading the students. And I will again speak about my guitar playing student, Eva. She opened, for example, one of the lessons on a national holiday. She wouldn't have told me under normal circumstances, but I see it here, and I can give her a pat on the back before she starts the next lesson. And then that makes me and her happy. And I'm glad that this is due to Red Monster. So this is in the pilot phase now. I mentioned this, and I would like to share some reviews of my students, usually young adults. So the feedback corresponds to that. The first student said she was really happy and enthusiastic about the study because it's not just pure theory and grammar as in school, which they are happy about within Red Monster, because Red Monster also includes something from everyday life. And another student, this I think is Mrs. Eva, she said that she would prefer more difficult exercises because she thinks that it will help her test the material and learn it. Could you imagine that someone in school could, on a voluntary basis, ask for slightly more difficult material? I don't think so. So this is an indicator of the fact that we are going in the right direction. And the last student summed it up by saying it was not necessary to force yourself to study, which is probably the nicest feedback that a teacher could receive. And it's a good indicator that we are going in the right direction with our courses. I believe that German with the monster is not the last successful course we have, that you'll see many more. This is all on my behalf, and thank you for your attention.
Well, let me add quickly experiences from the elementary and secondary school teachers, because they also enter this learning process in different stages. So in the beginning, when a new topic is to be introduced, pre-concepts, or in the end, some verification, joint verification. And as the learning environment is interactive, so it is possible to incorporate some group learning approach, and the group of students may go through the lessons jointly. Homework. For us, what was interesting was that these courses may be also used when the teacher is absent or if there is some substitution. In conclusion, I would like to come back to the canapés or quick bites. Obviously, it is not possible to prepare each and every topic in this format, and not everybody wants to have this quick bite, so to say. But in brief, this is one of the possibilities so that we do not die from hunger in the future. Thank you very much. I thank you for your presentations, and we have a few questions. Well, this topic is really interesting, and we could discuss it for quite some time. There is a question here concerning the learning per se. It was said that it is very good to learn upon the feedback, and that your answer was wrong and the real answer, right one, is this one. But there is a possibility of several answers, so I may say you have chosen this one instead of that, and perhaps you could be confused by this. Is it possible to provide feedback on the basis of your answer selection choice? Yes, it is possible, but it's very difficult or demanding for the authors so that they are able to take into account all potential answers. Once we have yes or no potential answers to the question, so that's easy, and the authors clearly distinguish it. But once you have several options, then it becomes immensely difficult. Well, what I meant actually was a situation when someone said, so you have chosen this object and you could be confused by this very angle. And that's why your answer was wrong. So in advance, you select the wrong answer as negative. Is it possible to take all such nuances into account? Yes, we are trying to provide such an explanation. We try to point out why a particular answer was not the right one. From the organization point of view, so I can imagine that you run the course, the one lesson, and you follow a certain sequence. So once you finish this level, these lessons, you may continue with the next one. So there is a sort of follow-up. It may be also based on points achieved. Yes, I do understand what you mean. The teaching application enables two possibilities. Once we work with open structure, meaning that a student selects any type of lessons. There are no limitation and prevention to the follow-up lessons. And then there is another approach that there must be a certain follow-up before you want to get into next lesson, so you must finish the previous one. And this is particularly appropriate for the language teaching, language learning. In case of Red Monster, so we have courses for elementary schools and secondary schools, and we assume that a student may get to these courses in the course of the school year, and there we apply the open structure. The student or pupil can choose from the lesson that he or she wants. Well, I have a question concerning the language courses. I remember from my studies that after a certain knowledge, you also listen to the native language, so to say. Is this a typical component, that there is a text on the screen and then you have, and this is followed by a question that this was the content, that was the content, etc. So we haven't reached that stage yet in our language courses. We have audio components in these courses for training pronunciation, or you see irregular verbs, etc. But for the future, we could add this, it would be great. I think that from the technology point of view, it's possible, as the previous colleague said, that such components may be added in any stage. If I may, our language edition is rather young, yeah? So it's an edition or sub-edition that offers a great development potential. When it comes to the concept of languages and microlearning, is it typical that the test is evaluated in a similar way in all questions, or if there is a bit more difficult question, so there must be 2 tests done. So I may get 2 points for each answer that is correct, or I skip the difficult question and continue with the next one. What's your experience? Well, I do understand. The tests are limited in time. In other words, we may set the time frame for individual questions, and for a simple question you have less time for your answer, and in this way we balance the different levels of questions. So you work with another parameter, but you actually use it. And maybe this is close to the fact that we haven't got so much time anymore. Nevertheless, thank you very much for another approach to another solution. I thank you both, you and your colleague, and let's hope that we will meet again in future. Thank you very much and goodbye.